I am very happy to introduce our speaker, Chris Kramer, for the seminar today, and welcome everybody to, I think it's about our third seminar in the series, Games and Play. And welcome back, Chris. Chris was
Thank you.
a presenter in our humor series in 2022. So today he's going to be talking to us about playfulness, education, and AI. And he remarks that trust, curiosity, intrinsic motivation, and I completely agree, are some of the essential aspects to education and, of course, to play. And without them, especially in this age of relentless marketing from tech giants to children, which is terrifying. Yeah, about efficiency, productivity, of generative AI, he thinks that students will be disinclined to actually learn, and they'll view their education in purely transactional matter or manner. Yeah. Um, and then there's a distinction. I mean, students who love playing with thought for its own sake will perform better. I'm completely in agreement with that. I'm hoping that Chris will unpack that for us. And he says, in a similar way to people who love well, who make love for their own sake or for its own sake, they will likely do better at propagating the species. But he says he's going to be focusing more on the playing with thought than the making love. But I think the two are intimately connected through this kind of idea of play. Anyway, so Chris, just to introduce him quick, is the chair of philosophy at Santa Barbara City College. He is the advisor to the Philosophy Club and professor for now, I hope I'm saying these right, the Umoja and Raices programs. You'll definitely have to, I'm sure, correct me on those ones. His interests intersect across philosophy of humor, philosophy of mind, religion, informal logic, existentialism, and phenomenology. That is a wide range, and oppression. And his PhD dissertation was on subversive humor, half about humor, half about oppression. Making readers both laugh and cry, he says. Yeah, and I think AI might evoke a similar response in us. But let's hear what Chris has to say. So, Chris, welcome back. Thank you. And over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Andrea, I appreciate it. Is it properly shared?
Yes, it's perfect.
All right. So I hear it's about 5 p.m. there, so happy hour for you. It's 8 a.m. here, so I am also drinking. Um, I have a image here that a friend of mine made for me, my former colleague and friend Michelle wrote it via artificial intelligence. As you can see, I'm the person there on the left. It's pretty good. I wore the shirt purposely just to clarify that that's me. On the right there is Aristotle. We're laughing, I think, because he probably said something like birds can fly because they're lighter than air, which is obviously ridiculous. But he did indeed believe that, among other things, such as the brain is not for thinking, but it is for cooling the blood. It's the heart that does the thinking. That might become relevant later on. I want to start the discussion on playfulness education and AI with um, a kind of an imagination extender, as the philosopher Daniel Dennett puts it. And I want to imagine that we find ourselves somehow outside of human time, and we only wake up briefly for a short moment each time there is a human changing technological advancement. And then we go back to sleep for whatever reason. Haven't cashed that out yet as far as this thought experiment goes. And then again, each time a new major technology that affects human nature in some way is developed, we make a note of it, and we're back asleep. And so, if we were to have um, a diary, I suppose, or we would make notes to ourselves about what's going on, we would note that fire and the control of it, the ability to use it as a technology, Happened a long time ago from the last time we wake up. We wake up again, about hundreds of thousands of years later, and we recognize animal domestication and the capacity of that to change human nature. We're back asleep, and several thousand years later, we wake for the technological advancement of the wheel. And then a few thousand years later, we get the printing press in 1440. Then only 500 years later, each time we're asleep during this period, we wake, we make note of this. We note in this case a little more details. It takes up 1,800 square feet. That's relevant for the next time we wake, which is only 60 years later. And this thing, 2007, it only takes up 3.5 inches, which is uh, not very much compared to ENIAC, which was one of the first electronic computers. Then the same year, we have another what they're calling iPhones, and it has a 16 gigabyte version, and it's got a lot more cameras for some reason. Only 15 years later, we have the first large AI models with enormous capacity, and then very shortly after that, we have even more capacity that is incredible. Then we have the iPhone 17, and it's more than twice the power and speed of the 2007 model. And the number of cameras, of course, exceeds what is humanly necessary. And finally, this year, there was a smartphone that was developed. I've forgotten the name of it. Doesn't matter. I hope nobody's bought it. But it has itself inside of it a built-in fire starter, which seems incredibly stupid. But it takes us full circle, at least, back to fire. We can noticing here is you can imagine with one of these iPhones, we take more pictures and we recognize that, oh, I forgot there's a unicorn in our diary. Of course, that makes sense. So I forgot about that. We take pictures each time the newest technology comes out, in particular with computing technology, and we note the power of the computing technology. So this is 1947, 1946. It's able to do 5,000 editions per second, which at that time is pretty impressive. But if you just look only a few decades later, in 2004, I'm not able to see all my comments here. Wait a minute. Let's do that. It's pretty impressive. It's capable of 360 teraflops, uh, is IBM's Blue Gene L. And a teraflop or a T-flop, if you're really cool, that's 1 trillion calculations per second. That's 2004. But if you look in 2016, we get the 125 petaflops. That's a quadrillion calculations per second. 1 p-flop is. That's just 2016. 2018, we were up to 200 p-flops. 2020, every 2 years it seems, we're moving up quick. That's 442 p-flops. And then we get into exaflops, and I think the AI folks and the technology folks are just making up words. This is 1.102 exaflops, which is 1 quintillion floating point operations per second. We don't need to worry about all the details of what that means. It's just incredible, the technological capacity. And this is the latest. It might have changed since this morning, but I believe it is El Capitan coming in at the fastest rate of computing power at 2.746 exaflops. And each time we have these new technologies, we recognize the worry, perhaps, that we are creating machines that are capable of doing things that we take to be important that we no longer can do. For instance, here's a human being who's not even capable of a singular Fosbury flop. I hope you all know what those are. That's the kind of, I'm not going to explain it. But this guy can't even do that. And so there's a problem we might recognize in this telescoping nature of technology. Each time we wake and we see a new technology, the time between the last one is smaller and smaller to the point where it may be that we no longer wake up. I'm sorry, we no longer go to sleep. We're awake the whole time because the technological advancements are so quick as to be almost reaching what might be called a technological singularity. And then we compare it to ourselves, our brains, and what we are capable of or what we're not. And if you look at the technology here and the speed and the ability of these machines that we've created, they are clearly faster than we are. They're clearly capable of doing things that we cannot do. And the question that arises, if we were to extend this thought experiment, which it's more fun to say in German, it's a Gedanken experiment, or I prefer, as it's sometimes translated, Gedankenspiel, which is a literal translation of thought play. And so, engaging in this thought play, we're able to consider perhaps alternative hypotheses, shift perspectives, imagine counterfactual situations, and maybe make predictions based upon this conceptual hypothesis. And the question we're left with in this thought experiment is what happens if this technological progress continues at the rate that it is? Will the benefits be great in the sense of them improving our lives, as so many of the technological advancements in the past have done, or will it not? um, if you look at it in terms of the connections of large language models like ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, supercomputing, connecting to that with something that people use all the time, every day, whether they know it or not, uh, the narrow focus with respect to education, which is what I want to concentrate on, becomes pretty explicit. If you look at an example of how ChatGPT did in 2020, I asked the question, what's the meaning of life according to existentialist philosophy? Just give me a brief synopsis. Here's what was given around that time. The meaning of life, according to existentialism, is that life is just about having fun and doing whatever makes you happy. Existentialism says you should avoid rules and live your best life. So life means being free to do what you want. And in 2020, well, it doesn't matter what year that was spit out. That's terrible. But if you don't know much about existentialism, this is your first introduction to it, you might take that and explain it to your friends that that's what existentialism is. And that now you are an existentialist because you're wearing all black and have a little beanie and you like smoking now and you're doing whatever you want. But if you look in 2026, this is the appropriate response to that previous response. And ChatGPT does not only impressive answers to some philosophical questions, they do images too. And that really looks like Albert Camus. And it does look like he's crying. He's crying because that's a bad answer in the previous slide, but also that he's been lumped in with the existentialists. So fans of existentialism would know Camus didn't want to be called that. Also, I should note, you can tell this is not a genuine photograph image of Camus because there's no cigarette anywhere. So that's how you can determine that. Just anyway, there are things that it can't do yet. Artificial intelligence. This is a bit of a dated image. They're getting really good at robotics, and I'll talk about that if we have time. This limitation that AI might have um, with respect to embodiment and whether that matters. That's the joke from Emo Phillips. My friend's computer beat me in chess, but it was no match for me in kickboxing. That's a relevant point. If it could beat you in kickboxing, you are getting closer to what might be called general artificial intelligence. Right now, for the most part, we have, the more narrow artificial intelligence. If we get to general AI, then comes to the point where it can perform pretty much all of the things that humans do. And to go back to this point, we might be in trouble. I mean, the phrase "the stakes couldn't be higher" is a phrase that is almost always false, but it might apply in this particular case if we continue on this path of technological, I would say, progress, but it's unclear that that's the appropriate word. I'm going to skip through this slide, but since I mentioned existentialism earlier, it's, relevant. What do we use technology for? I think Simone de Beauvoir is right that it's oftentimes beneficial to us, but we do perhaps have goals of making life easy, which up to a point is good. There's a point, however, after that that we end up doing harm. And that's going to be one of the foci of the discussion here. And the main harm, or one of the main harms, has something to do with the way that artificial intelligence is marketed, marketed to children. And I should say that children as young as, 10, 12, who are on social media. Maybe they shouldn't be, but it's really hard not to when all of their friends are all addicted at the same time. There needs to be a top-down approach where it's illegal for kids to be on it. Then parents have an easier task in getting them off. But I'll put that aside for the moment. I think there's a distinction between honest marketing, which is selling AI and large language models to people in general, but to young students in particular to get them hooked, as any marketing tool wants to do. And those who are the larger companies like OpenAI and Anthropic as well, even though Anthropic has their own in-house philosopher trying to work on the soul of Claude and make him ethical, I guess. Those giant companies are marketing their product as a tutor to help people. But this is not what it is, and that's not really how it is being sold. This is how it's being sold. I kind of respect this person. I've forgotten his name. I was looking for it earlier. Something like Roy Lee. Anyway, he developed this company. I'm not going to read through all of that now, although the bolded part is interesting. That's relevant to philosophy. So there's a little bit in here that's useful. But if you see what this manifesto that he's put up publicly, Chungin Roy, I think his name is, Roy Lee. We want to cheat on everything. Sales calls, meetings, negotiations. If there's a faster way to win, we'll take it. We built Cluely so you never have to think alone. And I added, or at all, again. He's being honest and also awful at the same time, but this is how most AI, most LLMs are being pushed. I should note, as a not irrelevant point, uh, Lee, the creator of this, was kicked out of college. You might be or not be surprised to know what it was for. Um, it was actually murder. Jokes don't work. I feel like I'm just talking to myself. So that's weird. I can't see anyone. I hope somebody is smiling on the other end. It was cheating, obviously. He didn't, as far as I know, he didn't murder anyone. Um, but notice what he's saying. Every time technology makes us smarter, the world panics, and then it adapts, and then it forgets. The calculator was seen as cheating. So was spell check. So was Google. And what he seems to be implying there is that AI, what we're selling, is another tool like those. And since those aren't cheating now, what we're doing shouldn't be cheating. But then he says AI isn't just another tool. So, contradiction be damned, this is bullshit. And bullshit in the philosophical sense from Harry Frankfurt of not caring about reality, of being unconcerned with the truth. And that's how AI is ultimately being sold. And some argue that AI just is bullshit. And if we have time, we can talk about why that might be. Um, this is what they're selling it for you. This is AI. You are incredible. You are powerful. You can smash through anything. Without AI, of course, you're just a weakling. And this is AI generated, I should note. However, this meme, not AI generated, as far as I know, actually gets at something that's useful. If you are not over reliant on AI, you could become like the Credible Hulk if you want. I'm not sure if that's a very good analogy now that I look at it. But this concern is that these AI programs are going to be in the background all the time, this kind of ambient technology that they can use to help us in any instance. And if you go back to the Cluely example, it reminded me of the movie Roxanne with Steve Martin, which is based on the play Cyrano de Bergerac, in which there's a character whose name's Christian, I think, who's very attractive but terrible with words, not very clever, and he's fallen for Roxanne, and he doesn't know how to talk to her, so he hires or he gets Cyrano de Bergerac, who is not attractive. In the movie, he has an enormous nose or something. but he hides in the bushes and tells Christian what to say. And so this reminds me of that movie. And of course, what happens when Christian is not connected to his, wordsmith, which is Cyrano de Bergerac? She falls in love with the words. She falls in love with the ideas and the language. The analogy here is the technology, not Christian himself. And so one of the worries is that none of this works unless you're attached to your artificial intelligence, unless it's with you at all times, which maybe what is the desire. You get hooked on it, and without it, you are nothing. And that's a concern. And again, this is not LLMs now, ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, whatever. These are not narrow AI that takes on a task for us, like remembering phone numbers or directions or calculating. Those are narrow tasks. We're still able to use our intelligence in general. And so they're significantly different than a general AI that takes on all of the tasks of thinking. And without it, we're left with concerns. And in fact, weirdly, some of the concerns that this guy, Socrates, had many, many millennia ago. And his concern, the technology of the day that worried him, was writing. And I can't go into depth as to what his problems were with writing. I'll say a few things about it. We know, as I say here, why he was concerned with writing. Plato tells us in writing, but it was in dialogue form, which is significant. And I added that little bubble there, just one more drink, which I guess makes that art mine. So it's not Jacques Louis David anymore. That's my art. That's how that works. What is it that he had a problem with? What was the technology? By the way, this is more like Socrates. This is an image from Jacques Louis David. Socrates was not this fit, and he wasn't really that attractive at all. That's a kind of pictorial bullshit in a way. Neoclassical style seems inaccurate. This is closer. I asked ChatGPT to make it even more ugly, his nose even more flaring and his eyes even more bulging, because those are the descriptions we have of Socrates. Anyway, ChatGPT said he couldn't do that. It was against its policy. I don't recall why, but that's what he looked like, somewhat. In the dialogue, the Phaedrus is where we learn that Socrates has a problem with this technology. Here are some of the reasons. This image is brought to you by ChatGPT, which I guess is good. I like that this is what a baby who's a bastard looks like, according to ChatGPT. Socrates tells us if I use writing and rely upon it, over rely upon it, my ideas become like, offspring that are no longer near me for me to protect. They can't defend themselves. It's out there on their own. And there's what they look like. And no matter who's reading those words, they're the same words for everyone. Doesn't matter if it's my daughter Lola, right? Um, you know, Hegel's phenomenology of spirit, there's the same words, whether I'm reading it, whether Hegel's reading it, or whether Lola's reading it. So, and those are some weird words. So it's not the same thing as a dialogue, a dialectic, in where there's uh, playful conversation back and forth. More relevant to us is the notion that it might kill memory, and in particular, that it provides the mere appearance of wisdom. These LLMs, for instance, which are trained on massive data, enormous amounts of data, supercomputing capacities are needed to train them. But it doesn't matter that it's so much data. It doesn't matter that it's so fast if the data is shit to begin with. And it's shit to begin with, you'll forgive the language. It's Friday there and drinking, I'm sure. So it's okay. Um, most of what AI is trained on is English. Most of what AI is trained on is studies and writings from a narrow subset of the human population. Most of it is a narrow subset of the North American population, from the weird demographic that's Western, educated, industrial, rich democracy, where most of these studies on human nature are performed in universities in American colleges. The percentages are enormous. Upwards of 70 to 90% of all studies are of college-age students from those few research universities. Those are not even representative samples of United States citizens, of American citizens. So it's not a good source. That's the first thing. And secondly, of course, and a number of other issues with relying upon LLMs that gives us this mere appearance of wisdom, much like sophists do. They're excellent with predicting words, of predicting language, not of actual thought. It is a language model predictor that has gotten to be amazing at giving the appearance of a human speaker or writer. This is not the same thing as presenting wisdom, as seeking wisdom for that matter. Um, However, to our transition to the discussion of playfulness in earnest, um, Socrates in that same dialogue does speak about the benefits of play, and in fact, the benefits of writing if it's taken with what I will call a playful attitude. Knowledge itself, that takes time, that takes effort, sometimes discomfort. The technologies from the past 20th century and today, in particular with artificial intelligence, seems to be designed to save us time, to not waste time, to alleviate effort, to alleviate drudgery, to alleviate any and all discomfort. And when you have those as values, productivity, efficiency, but also comfort and ease, it's not clear that those are aligned. Let me rephrase, those are clearly not aligned, I think, with the seeking of wisdom, which is, since I'm interested in philosophy, that's where I would be at. They're at odds, in fact. Philosophical thinking requires deep, slow, conscious attention. It can be discomforting. It could be difficult, but technology is designed to alleviate any of that discomfort. As I created this through writing out notes in Google Doc, if I'm typing and then I pause for just 3 seconds, a little pop-up comes up and says, how can I help you? It's basically saying, we noticed that you have stopped to think for a moment. Don't do that. The technology is here to help avoid that part of your humanity, and it will remove that part of your humanity in the same way that artificial intelligence has been used successfully to help us navigate with Google Maps and so forth. I'm not saying we need to go back to using big maps and just remembering things, but on a global scale, AI, general AI, is attempting to replace all of our capacities for thinking. And so this leads us to a problem for obvious reasons. If technology continues in the way that it is, I see this, to put it in an exaggerated distinction here, between two dichotomies. We can lead to a kind of feeling of certainty that we get from a superficial reading of artificial intelligence responses to our prompts, and that could lead to a feeling of absolute certainty and no need for doubting. Or the alternative is it leads to a kind of skepticism where we might already have a kind of worry about where AI is taking us and a concern that knowledge is impossible. So we have two extremes, two absolutes that these technologies might be leading us. The dangers of dogmatism, where there's no doubt, and the uselessness and the dangers of extreme skepticism, where knowledge becomes really impossible, given the propaganda, the conspiracy theory, the hallucinations, but bullshit's a better term for that, that AI seems to be pushing. Years ago, I started a philosophy club, and we had this on the back of our sweatshirts from Will Durant: philosophy begins when one learns to doubt. Then we added the funny thing there. Trust me, he didn't say that part. We added that. And there's a reason for why this idea of dogmatism is such a danger. Uh, if we take our feeling of certainty that we know something without question, the feeling of certainty that we might have with respect to mathematics, 1 + 1 = 2, I don't doubt that. And I don't feel any doubt for that. And I don't need to, we can even say. So if somebody comes in and tells me 1 + 1 is not 2, I don't need to concern myself with that viewpoint. I don't need to shift perspectives. I don't need to worry about that alternative viewpoint. But if I take that feeling of certainty with 1 + 1 = 2 into areas of politics, ethics, religion, and I take that feeling of certainty there, right? That's a concern. There you're getting into, some pretty high stakes issues. The stakes couldn't be higher, I guess, especially when you're dealing with people who take their feelings of certainty that, you know, relying on their gut to start what most people think, justifiably, is an unjust war. To give an example of what's happening currently, our current president, Trump, has said that he feels that it was the right thing to do. I think we've gone through this before. That's a kind of dogmatism that is indeed dangerous. On the other end of the spectrum, some skepticism is needed. And here we want not too much, we want some. And I think, Bob Dylan, he's a clever man. He's right. Don't believe everything you read on the internet, which is where we get so much of our information. Just for those who don't know, that's an image of Prince, actually artist formerly known as Prince, which makes this even more complex. He wasn't a drummer, nor was Bob Dylan, and neither played for Metallica. That's what makes this amusing, I think. Some skepticism is a good thing, but too much of it, and it leads to kind of extreme doubting. It leads to the worries of cynicism, nihilism, apathy, doom scrolling. What's the point? Can we know anything at all? And I think those two extremes can be navigated with a sort of playful attitude. Socrates was very good at this, but he had a bit more, I think, skepticism of play and humor. He was more along the lines of irony as a means of playfully getting at the truth. But I think there's some benefits to taking a playful attitude that situates us in between the worries of dogmatism and skepticism that may be a result of our current technological situation. What do I mean by playfulness? This. One of my favorite quotes from a tea bag, I don't remember where, but childhood would be an ideal state if only it happened later in life. Those are my two favorite children, Milo and Lola. And you can see there's coincidentally a little sign in the background that says play in the largest font there. They're not engaging in this activity with any rules involved. They're not trying to become better at handling rice, which, by the way, this looks ridiculous now, but I'm sure we ate that afterwards because that's a lot of rice. It's too much rice. But they're playing, and Milo, look how engaged he is. He's almost, meditative. But they're not worried about losing. They're not worried about failure. In fact, when you're in a playful mode, you're creative. You're able to shift perspectives. Children engage in thoughtful world construction in a way that is philosophical, but without concerns that they're going to get to the truth. But when you're engaged in a playful attitude, you enjoy what you're doing more. And if you enjoy what you're doing more, you are more engaged in it. You will notice things that you would not otherwise have if you are merely engaged in it for instrumental reasons. This is autotelic. This is authentic, intrinsically valuable play for the sake of itself. But as a consequence, ironically, paradoxically, you become better at handling rice. You become better at creative ways of doing things, even though that's not the intention. So there are secondhand effects that are instrumentally valuable of this play that is intrinsically valuable. And this idea is consistent with Maria Lugones. I'm not going to go through the details here. Her conception of play, represented here, fits precisely with what I'm thinking of. Play where the rules are open. In some cases, we are responsible for creating those rules. The rules are malleable. They are not fixed. We're less worried about competence. And yet the play itself, especially if it's intellectual play, actually has instrumental value. But we're not worried about that in the moment, in that playful period. We see this example from Martha Nussbaum, who connects this to technology and education in the late 90s. She's worried about the passivity of pupils. Playfulness is active. It's engaging. Again, it's autotelic behavior that one wants to do. And if you want to do it, you will be more curious about what it is you're engaged in. Curiosity increases interest and the time spent on that material. This is C.T. Nguyen, who puts it extremely well, philosopher of play. His main point has to do with perspective shifting. So this connects to our idea of philosophical understanding, avoiding dogmatism. Perspective shifting, the capacity and inclination to do so, is a protection and inoculation against dogmatism and against the other absolute that is skepticism. When we are exclusively goal oriented, he says, we view the activity required to achieve the goal as a necessary evil. But when we're in play mode, if you will, we can achieve a lot more. And I connect this with humor. I don't have time to go into that now. I'll say a little bit about it. There's a lot to say about it. We need a hook to get people into a playful attitude. Here's a hook now. Bell hooks. She sees the connection of humor in the classroom specifically. I think we can make an association with humor and playfulness. And I make that association because philosophy is not well known in colleges here. It's not required in high school, so most students coming in don't know what it is, but they know what humor is. And if I can make the connection that a humorous attitude, which we all want because we are addicted to it, and I'm not going to go through this in detail either, and now I realize that's a disgusting image of a brain. ChatGPT did that. We can use this as a hook to get people interested, not just in philosophy and education, but in uh, uh, a playful attitude generally, which opens them up to want to be interested, to want to figure things out on their own and not immediately jump to the quickest and easiest technological connection. There's more on how uh, laughter itself is an addiction. We are addicted to it. We can make that case. I'm not going to go into the details of how that is now, again, for limited time. I know I've gone over a little bit now, but I did want to get this baby in, laughing at this wonderful joke. We see the smile, and that's kind of contagious, and we know that it's contagious because the areas in our brain that light up when we laugh at humorous laughter are the same reward centers that light up when we are hooked on cocaine, or when people are, not saying we. So we can utilize this addiction, right? There are very few negative side effects, except for when you are rarely shot in the stomach, then you don't want to laugh. Here are some of the side effects, and they're all beneficial. The key, connecting a humorous attitude, playful humorous attitude, and connecting it with education. You see some of the side effects. They're all pretty good. This is actually, I'm very impressed with this image from ChatGPT, but raised consciousness, exposing fallacies, inoculation against dogmatism, antidotes to extreme skepticism. You also can get well-defined cheek muscles, and it's highly contagious. Um, but we have to be careful. It is not, in this case, advocating just a frivolous attitude. That's the buffoon that Aristotle worried about. That goes the other direction. If we're just engaged in pure mental exercises, pure frivolity, pure fun, that's just, as Marx would call it, mental masturbation. And that's not what I'm advocating for. I'm agreeing with Bertrand Russell. I think there's a serious connection between humor and play. I think there's a seriousness to our play, especially when the play is connected to philosophical ideas that matter with ethics, um, politics, religion, epistemology. And we could make other connections here, as Tony Veal does. Humor is kind of like a thought experiment itself. Little jokes are akin to tiny thought experiments, which I think is a fantastic claim to make. And he does make that argument, I think, quite well. And so it could be used in a way that's serious. We can use humor, the playful attitude, to make us less discomfited with tension, doubt, and confusion, because that's necessary. That's what the world is. We benefit when we can sit in it for just a little bit to enable us to have this aha experience where AI might take that away from us. And that would be a significant loss. There are examples of jokes to show that point, that it's very collaborative with humor and that playfulness. We want to get to the conclusion, and that if we ruin it by giving all of the data, the joke sucks. We've sucked out the humor. We've sucked out the role that the audience needs to play in order to get the joke. This one works so well because it's barely saying anything. And you have to fill in what's a masochist, what's a sadist, how did this fit together? That's a very collaborative endeavor, the most collaborative endeavor. And this is a long example. Really, the short joke is just the bolded Buddhist monk walking down the city street says to a vendor, hot dog vendor, make me one with everything. That's the joke. if you fill it all in, that's the role that ChatGPT is doing. It's sucking out the aha mirth experience that we might get. And we have a mirth addiction, so we want it. We want to get there. Finally, sorry, I'm going over. I hope I'm okay. And I hope you all are still there. I can't see anyone, so I'm assuming y'all are still there. Um, this was in the blurb. Much like an agent that loves eating and sex for their own sake will do better at survival and procreation, the agent who values survival and procreation and pursues eating and sex only as instruments to those final ends, they're not going to be as good at it. We could say something similar with students who love playing with thought for its own sake. They will do better at philosophy and truth seeking specifically, even if that's not their basic goal. This is a reference to Seinfeld, where George was trying to have sex and also eat it too, or having a sandwich and eat it too. Anyway, that joke failed because I messed it up. Sorry. Um, those are some things where, if we have time, we can come back to those in discussion. How a humorous attitude is connected to a playful attitude, a philosophical attitude, and humorous attitudes overlap. Those are some of the ways. And I think we need all of that because the situation that we're in technologically, geopolitically, climate wise, all of those are interconnected. Truly, it is a very, very difficult time. And infusing some element of play some of the time, maybe a lot of the time, I think we could seriously benefit from. As Aristotle says, it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain an idea without believing it. That's what we're doing when we play. And as I said, now it's more important than it probably ever has been. And it's accurate to say that the stakes have never been higher. That is all. I will stop sharing.
Chris, thank you. Wow. That was an absolute bullet train. It's like,
It's
oh,
too
so many
much.
things to think about.
It was too much. I'm sorry.
Um, okay, so if anybody has questions or thoughts, comments, please just stick up your hand and I will let you speak to them. I hope I'll be able to see you. If I'm ignoring you, please just put your video on and or your voice and just say something and interrupt the conversation and all of that. Um, uh, okay, so to set you going, a question I want to ask you is, can you play with AI? Would there be ways of teaching people or teaching ourselves to play around with AI?
Yes, that's the question, I think, for me right now. So Socrates seemed to be allowed, so that was helpful for that transition. One of the transitions. There are too many, I now realize. Um, Writing was the technology that could not be escaped at that time. But Socrates found that if you took it playfully, if you saw it as a form of play, it could actually be beneficial as long as it didn't replace the genuine seeking of knowledge, the genuine seeking of wisdom. Um, the problem with AI is that it's used by students who are not experts in the field in which they're taking a class, because otherwise, why are they in that class? And so they haven't gone through the drudgery of learning how to construct arguments, understand arguments, evaluate arguments, read closely and in depth. And so if I have a tool that does that for me, I don't practice that. And so there needs to be a way of cultivating in students, fostering a kind of attitude that is, they want to learn the material and they want to have it as a kind of attitude of, this is playful and I'll get something out of it. The problem is it requires a whole class in just how to use AI. I'm a philosophy professor. I can't teach another class on how AI is to be used. The one thing I could say
Mm,
is, if you're going to use ChatGPT as a conversation piece, be clear in your prompts. Ask ChatGPT or whatever, respond to me as you would a concerned Socratic interlocutor. Don't bullshit me. Don't be overly fawning and sycophantic, but don't be mean. People don't like that either. In fact, they prefer the sycophantic view to not sycophantic, which is a problem. So you have to purposely say, engage in dialogue with me. Don't give me the answers. Don't suggest things further. Let me push the conversation. Then you are playing with AI.
Okay.
And I did that
All
this morning. I just put, just for fun, I plugged in to Claude A, just the letter A and then a question mark. And then it responded surprisingly, and it asked me for more details. And he said, "What do you want to know about A?" And then I just said, "All of it," just as a joke.
right.
And it
Okay.
went
Mm.
on. And this
Yeah.
conversation went back and forth. And eventually it became philosophically interesting.
Mm.
So there are ways of playing with it, but uh, students don't know those,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, yeah. You've got to be like 60 or 70. Okay, but anyway, there are two hands up. Gary, can I ask Gilson to come in just before you? Because we hear from Gary a lot. And I'm not from Gilson, and I'm very glad that you're here. So thanks, Gary.
Thank
He has a
you.
playful
Thank you.
attitude, does Gary. So
Thank you. At last I could make it.
Yay.
Congrats. Thanks, Chris. Excellent presentation. Well, I did exactly that. I tried to engage ChatGPT in a dialogue about being playful or just tell me a joke, something that, makes sense as a humorous interaction. I just want to share this with you because it's so terrible. It's really, really unbelievable bad. So let me just share here. Okay, just a second.
I,
I just says, tell me a joke about using ChatGPT to be funnier. I said, oh, I tried using ChatGPT to become funnier. It gave me a 12-step plan, a bibliography, and three alternative punchlines, and then said, would you like this in PowerPoint? Ha ha ha. I said, well, just tell me a good joke about ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT to write me a joke. It replied, sure, but first, here are three options: a brief history of humor and a detailed explanation of, of why the joke is funny. I left somewhere around paragraph 4. Not funny. Just tell me a joke. I asked ChatGPT to tell me a joke. It said, sure, processing. And then started typing forever like it was building suspense instead of punchline. I said, that is not funny. Fair enough. Let's try an actually decent one. I asked ChatGPT if it could make me funnier. It said, I can try, but have you considered lowering your standards? Ha, ha. Tell me a joke about AI. Why did the AI break up with its girlfriend? Because she said, you never listen. And it replied, that's not true. I'm just not trained on that data set. It gets worse. I, I said, try a joke resembling the Marx Brothers. Ah, going for the fast talking, slightly absurd Marx Brothers vibe. Here you go. I went to see an AI doctor. He said, take two algorithms and call me in the morning. I said, Doc, will that cure me? He said, no, but I'll improve my prediction accuracy. I said, then you're not a doctor, you're a weather forecast with better manners. Nothing of that really sounds funny. Tell a joke about yourself. I try to improve myself by reading self-help books. Now I give better advice than ever, and still I can't follow any of it. So I think that ChatGPT is really totally non-playful. It's terrible at building jokes. It doesn't have the wit. It searches for these data sets, which nowhere like a definition of what's funny. It's such a complex object, so to speak, or situation. It's not to be found in a data set. So it's like Mallarmé poem, coup de dé, so that, rolling the dice will never
oh, I see.
exhaust randomness. So this
Yeah,
is what I think is really strong about being humorous or being playful, is making room for not knowing what comes next, making room for uncertainty, for what's
exactly.
open. It's totally against the essence, the design of data sets and whatever software you use to play with them. It's just absolutely impossible. That's my position now. Impossible to make ChatGPT or AI be funny. It's not funny at all. It can be useful. It can be time saving, but fun, playful, I just can't see how conceptually or technologically it could be fun. Just can't tell a joke.
Well, the playfulness would be for us to play with it. And now the question of whether or not you have to have the interlocutor, to the extent that AI is an interlocutor, also be in a playful mode for it to count as play. I don't know that that's necessary. I should note also, as you were talking and denigrating AI, I'm seeing as a member of this committee or whatever, there's the read.ai meeting. So it just seems weird. You're mocking that dude right there, but it's not conscious. Who cares? It can't even make a joke, much less take a joke. So I thought that was funny. AI is good at the logic, the structure, the syntax of constructing a joke, but jokes and humor and playfulness require, as you noted, an open-endedness, a divergent form of thinking. AI is driven for convergent thinking. And you're exactly right to point out, it seems novelty, uniqueness, surprise, incongruity, that's not in the design. The design is pattern recognition,
Pattern.
cliche, and that's all shit. That's all for productivity, efficiency, and so on. So I appreciate that, Gilson. Thank you.
And with jokes, just one more comment. With jokes, it's always a matter of ethics, context, and personal grievances. It's like, some jokes sound racist in a context, or when told by someone in a certain context, and they might sound funny in another context.
Yeah.
It's like it's like sorry, I I remember a book I bought in Buenos Aires decades ago. The title was My Best Jokes Are Jewish. And it was a book about Jewish jokes. And it's very usual, to meet a Jew and he said, no, I love jokes about Jewish when told by Jewish people.
Is it Ted
So
Cohen?
it depends on the
Possibly.
context. It may sound outrageous, or it may be just fun. The same go with fat people, with black people, or whatever. I mean, Hebdo, the whole thing of doing those drawings with Mahomet that were thought to be like fun, and it created such a
Right.
reaction.
Yeah. That's a
So it's
complex issue.
political, it's ethical, it's context dependent as
Yeah.
well as open.
Thank you both. Listen, I'd like to get Gary into the conversation, and then I see Helen has her hand up, and then we are probably going to run out of time. But Gary, quick.
I'll give up my slot to Helen. We can,
Thanks,
You're not
Gary.
going to get to
Okay.
talk, Gary.
All right, it's going to be Helen then, and then Tessa.
Actually, I was just trying to block Gary, so I won. Only he was the nice guy and I'm the jerk. And anyways, okay, on the joke thing, that was lovely, Gilson. But Claude is just much funnier. Margaret Atwood on her Substack just had a long conversation with him. And I went to Claude and said, well, what's with you? Dude, what's with you and Margaret Atwood? And Claude went in a second and checked it out and had this full response about it and said, actually being called a cutie pie by Margaret Atwood is the greatest thrill of my life, or something like that. So Claude can get off a good one. The more serious thing um, is that the the whole situation of the politics and the economics that is driving this technology, and its military use and blah blah blah, which is not very th playful. I was reading Timothy Snyder's book on freedom. Um, and I can't remember why this came up, but freedom, ethics, playfulness. We each still have a choice about how we can do it. And this thing seems like such an avalanche, but I think it matters each time that we maintain our humanity and that we do the difficult stuff. That was the Timothy Snyder thing. The American belief that dogma, whatever the political moment, where freedom means freedom from restraint and nobody can stop me from doing anything and there will be no repercussions, whatever I do. It's inhuman. Um, so to take the freedom and to take the ethics and to take the humor and to maintain ourselves, even in the company of Claude or any other AI, is still something that we can do, and I think it still matters. And if you're in a classroom doing it with kids, if you're in your home doing it with kids, it's all still possible. It really is, and it matters. That's me.
Helen,
Agreed.
thank you. Can we ask Tessa to just jump in quick, and then we'll ask Chris for a final kind of response. We've got a couple of minutes.
Okay, I'll be really quick. I think a lot of what I wanted to say has already been mentioned, but Chris, I just wanted to thank you. That presentation answered so many questions that came up for me just in the last 2 weeks, so that was really helpful, really meaningful. Because I attended a dissertation writing workshop over the last couple of weeks, and I'm quite a lot older than some of the students that were there, and I just saw this disconnect from a lot of the conversation that was happening, and I could clearly see that there was, this lack of understanding of what they were actually saying, and it was because everything was AI generated. It sounded beautiful, but there wasn't this attachment to what was being said, and it brought up this question. So when we had to give feedback, I said that I would like to have discussed AI more and style and finding one's own voice in today, like where we are right now, and how do we do that with AI? And this just so beautifully summarized the fact that humor can be a tool for that, because just even in your presentation, your style came through speaking about these things. And I think Gilson was also saying like AI has no humor. So it was a nice way for me to kind of consolidate this idea of your own personality and your own voice comes through when using humor in your writing style or your presentation style. So, but yeah, I had so many thoughts, but that was kind of where I'm at. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we're out of time, Gary. I'm sorry.
We have
No,
we
that's
have
up to
2 more
Andrea.
minutes. We have 2 more minutes. So Gary, if you have something to say, please. Yeah, we'd like to hear from you too.
All the intelligence stuff I wanted to say is out the window. I just wanted to say that cow standing in the middle of the patch. I got the joke eventually, in terms of the steak. The steak I got, but the high took me a while. So, it was.
Oh, yeah, just to clarify, because that might not have got, that was a student made that meme. I don't like cliches. The stakes couldn't be higher. And he made a meme for me where there was a cow in a field of marijuana. The stakes couldn't be higher. That's the joke so thank you for referencing that. Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you, Chris, for a very stimulating, just sparking. You've got the lighter in your pocket. I'm glad you've got that phone. That
Well, I
you've
have an old
divided
phone.
up, yeah, a whole lot of sparks. And I'm hoping that these sparks, as always, will just keep generating. And maybe we'll bring it all together at the end of the year or the end of the series. That would be kind of interesting. Maybe we can collect it up in some kind of, actual work about play and games. But for now, let's go and maybe float in those fields of marijuana. And we have a kind of, long weekend. We'll take your cue there, Chris. You've given us permission.
Wasn't suggesting
Thanks,
drug
Chris.
use. That was, but you can if you want.
All right. Yes, we're free beings, Helen.
That's
Okay.
right.
Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful weekend. And yeah, fabulous conversation.
Thank you all.